Chapter 29 Divine Visitation 30th Session. When last met, yet again everyone was awoken by Perkring's crow signaling dawn. With nothing left to do in Circe, the party packed up their equipment and started their return to the moat. The usual culprits of late risers in Maka and Joker were annoyed by the early departure plans, and they made their annoyance known, but they walked amongst the party nonetheless. Just like last time, the first day of travel was uneventful. But as the party got close to calling their travel done for the day, Leste and Nixie noticed a campfire off in the distance. It seemed to be only about 30 minutes out, and most of the party was curious at the sight, so they all continued, just a bit longer, to see who was at the fire. As they approached, the party made their advance abundantly clear, so that those at the camp were not frightened at their arrival. As the menagerie got closer, it became clear only one person was present at the camp, an elven lady with long, dark hair wearing some sort of plate armor, adorned with reddish-purple fabrics. She showed no malice or disappointment at the party's approach, so the menagerie continued to her, and were greeted with a soft smile upon their arrival. On closer inspection, her armor was elegant and in great condition, and the cloth she wore was adorned with the symbols of Isoto. A follower of the karmic deities was something the party had not seen before, so they eagerly sat with her as she introduced herself as Renin Kinjor, and everyone else followed suit shortly after. Of note, Joker, as paranoid as ever, introduced himself as Jay, just like he did with the party when they first met, but he showed no outward skepticism towards this person. Her armor demanded attention, so, to break the ice, the party asked about where it came from. She replied that it was from her home of Oregot, and it was a gift from her parents. Leste complimented the upkeep she put into the armor, to which Renan replied that she did not have much, so she made sure to take care of it well. The party then asked about the symbols of Isoto adorning the armor, to which she explained that the symbols were something of her own choice, a modification to the armor she was gifted. She let everyone know her parents are part of the Cult of Creation, a group that reveres the god of creation Aragos. She grew up in the cult, but eventually found information on and fell in love with Isoto, so she modified her armor to reflect that love. After talking long enough, she then asked the party about their origins and why they were here. Each party member gave a brief description of their own past, with Sonora letting on about her connection with Lily, then quickly turned the questions back on to her, asking why she was here if her home was all the way across the Serpent's Den. To much of the party's shock, she said that she was traveling in hopes of becoming blessed by and serving Belmar. Leste then spoke up, bringing up that, coincidentally, the party was traveling to Tali as well, but admitted how they were trying to visit Belmar as well. Renin thus far enjoyed the company of the party, so with this coincidence, she asked if they were interested in traveling with her to the capital. Maka was slightly uncomfortable at the idea, given that karmic deities are typically bad omens, but after a quick chat with Leste, everyone was at least fine with the idea of her tagging along. Renin was happy at everyone accepting the proposition and invited more questions about herself to pass the time. The party still wanted to know more of the specifics about her past, so she elaborated on how she became interested in Isoto not just from the readings she could find on him, but also from the stories she heard of Belmar. From everything she had heard, considering where Belmar was born, she was dealt an unfair hand, so Renin naturally grew to admire her. This admiration of both Belmar and Isoto grew to the point where she realized that the Cult of Creation was not for her, so she simply left the cult. She still remained in Haven as she established a small temple to Isoto in the city with some like-minded individuals, but once she had heard of Belmar's appearance in Tale, she was compelled to see her. She left the temple in the hands of those that helped establish it with her, and she started traveling eastward as of a few months ago. Since the start of her travels, it had mostly been uneventful, other than some light boasting about how she fought in a plague on behalf of a merchant. With her story told, she turned the questions again on the party. She was told where everyone was from and who they were, but she was curious about the group before her and how they met one another. With this, the party had a fun time recollecting how they met despite the dire circumstances of the siege of Circe. They disclosed how they were the ones to commandeer a Ragin airship in Circe and how they handed it off to Tail. Then, how they got to see Belmar in Vimote defending the city and parade around shortly after the victory. Renan grew excited and curious at the mention of Belmar, and asked what she was like. The party agreed she was extremely cool, but did not disclose much more than that, not letting on the depth of how well they actually knew her. Renan was satisfied with this story, so the party followed up with one final question. What would she do if she was denied by Belmar? She simply responded that she would return to Haven and focus on her temple. Her faith in Isato did not seem to waver at the thought of being denied by his marked, which was somewhat inspiring. With everyone's curiosity satisfied, it was agreed that watches should be made, and slept should be taken, so Renan along with Nixie set up for the first watch while everyone else rested. The two talked about Nixie's home of Murad, and of her childhood, all of which were fond memories to look back upon. After those two, Leste took watch, where she passed the time reciting a story of a famous dragonborn from her home, who overcame hardship to be deemed fit to protect Valhira. This story was meant for Kaun, but she did notice a visage of a dragon appearing in the campfire before her to partake in the story as well. To round off the watches, Maka sat in the night, embracing the calm stillness of nature as the night slowly turned to dawn, which, as usual, was interrupted by Perkring during his normally scheduled call. This obviously startled Renan awake, but the menagerie who was accustomed to this assisted her in getting up, with Nixie giving her some of her tea to welcome the early morning. The party had some idle chats while Renan adjusted to being awake. Then, after she was ready, everyone packed up. Before they left, Renan said a few prayers, and everyone was traveling once again. The journey was an uneventful one, but the path was familiar. The party had already traveled from Circe to Vermont a month back, and not much had changed the roads since then. But Leste was full of anticipation along the travel today, looking out for a point she knew she would remember towards the end of the day. As Vermont was in sight, far off in the distance, and about 30 minutes of good travel remained in the day, Leste demanded the party stop and rest for the night, as she found the place she was looking for. A month ago, the party took rest here, and here, Kaun hatched from his egg and was welcomed to Amaranthine. This place was important not just to her, but all of dragonkind, as it marked the first public hatching outside of Valhira for generations. To her, though, this meant more than just where Kaun hatched, as it was where she once again had a brood. So not just for Kaun, but for her menagerie. She started preparing for a celebration. Without much explanation, she started grabbing sticks and logs and set them in an orientation of 3 unlit bonfires, creating a large triangle flipped upside down. Nixie and Perkring caught on to what she was doing, so they assisted her, and the 3 created 6 smaller kindlings that flanked the larger triangle to make 2 smaller ones beside it. Perkring then took out some of his shiny rocks and the flecks of Kaun's scales he had, and created smaller triangles within the structure the 3 made. The rest of the group watched respectfully as the 3 got to work. Then, once everything was done, everyone stood back as Leste lit the fires. As the last kindling was lit, a sense of unity and prayer washed between the menagerie, and an irregular pattern fell amongst the flames. At first, the flames in one of the smaller triangles appeared to just be swaying against the wind. Then, all the flames of the triangle coalesced together, wreathing the area in flame. At this, Leste stepped back and opened Kaun's bag enough so that he could peek out and see what was going on. Shortly after, the second small triangle followed suit, coalescing and engulfing the triangle in flame as well. These pyres then reached out to the nearest bonfire, and eventually connected all the fires into one massive procession as the flames grew deafening. To most, this sounded like a roaring gale, but Leste recognized these winds as the sounds of a dragon taking flight. As the sound grew almost too loud to bear, a silhouette of a red dragon appeared in the flames. They said nothing as they flapped their wings and disappeared, as a wave of silence, warmth, and love overtook all. Everyone was stunned. Then, one by one, they noticed that the rocks and scales Perkring placed within the triangles shifted to the center of the large, inverted triangle and transformed into the full symbol of Qlid. Leste broke the silence and asked aloud if it was actually Qlid this time. Nixie and Joker responded in the affirmative, as a visitation like that was only one fit for the divine. Leste then asked Renan politely to turn away, and understanding the importance of the moment, she gave everyone space and sat along the tree line until someone would tell her that it was appropriate to return. Perkring then approached the flames, and he sat in front of the full symbol of Qlid. He took out the hairpin he bought a while back and placed it upon the symbol, then prayed. Leste then approached the symbol as well, as she let Kaun out of his bag and let him take in the moment in full. He looked around at the fire surrounding him, understanding as best as he could the weight of what had just happened. Then he put his head into Leste's chest as he began to nuzzle her. Afterwards, he gently placed his snout on the symbol, where his egg flakes were formed to create a triangle, then returned to his bag, not to force Renan out of this moment for too long. At this, Leste headed off to Renan, letting her know that she could return, then let everyone know she needed a moment to herself as she walked into the forest. Alone, she sent a prayer to Qlid, humbly asking them to let Bronca know what happened here today. She then let Kaun out of his bag again and hugged him. She looked him in the eyes and told him to have fun and fly wherever he wanted to as she mounted him. He was ecstatic and off in the air in moments. As Leste departed, Joker approached one of the smaller flames, which returned to a reasonable size. He then sat himself with his back to Renan, so that when he removed the illusion cloaking his arms, Renan could not see his ashen form. He then extended his arms into the fire, and let them rest there. Shortly after this, Perkring got done with his prayers and approached Joker, asking if he was okay. He said he was, and invited his friend to sit alongside him, asking Perkring to explain the situation. He sat, then told the tale of how Kaun was hatched from here. The two then talked about how both did not expect the gods to be this involved with mortals. Both had only heard fairy tales about things that happened like tonight. So to bear witness to something like that in person was stunning. Joker was especially taken aback, as to his knowledge, Qlid had been significantly more reclusive since Amora disappeared. For now, though, he did not want to speculate on the divine. He just wanted to take in the moment with his menagerie. With that, let us continue.